What if I told you the world isn't running out of oil, but silver? Most people have no idea how close we are to a structural shortage because silver has never been viewed as anything more than a poor man's gold. But this perception is outdated and dangerously incorrect. Silver is no longer primarily a monetary metal. It is now one of the most essential industrial metals on Earth, embedded in the backbone of modern energy, technology, medicine, and national security. Every solar panel, every electric vehicle, every 5G tower, every advanced medical imaging device, every precision-guided military system, they all require one metal that cannot be easily substituted: silver. And the world is consuming it far faster than we can mine it. This isn't theory. This isn't hype. This is a raw breakdown of data, extraction limits, geological constraints, industrial demand curves, and inventory depletion rates that are all accelerating at the same time. If you're watching this, pay close attention and leave your thoughts in the comments, because this may be one of the most important economic stories unfolding that almost nobody is prepared for. And if you're new here, subscribe right now, because this channel exposes the patterns and forces shaping the next global wealth transfer. Silver today is following a pattern almost identical to every historical commodity crisis. Think about oil in the 1970s, on wheat during the Irish famine, and palladium in the early 2000s. Each crisis followed the same 4 stages. Stage 1, the perception of oversupply. Everyone believes there's plenty, so prices stay low. Stage 2, tightening fundamentals. Inventories begin to fall, but the market largely ignores it. Stage 3, structural deficit recognition. This is the moment when the public finally realizes that supply can no longer meet demand. And Stage 4, panic and price dislocation. When physical shortages cause prices to move in ways that are violent, irrational, and unstoppable. Silver is now in Stage 3, and Stage 4 is approaching faster than most analysts want to admit. Let's look at the demand. Global solar photovoltaic demand alone could consume a staggering 200 million ounces of silver annually. Electric vehicles are projected to use up to 70 grams per vehicle. The expansion of 5G networks is accelerating consumption. Medical technology, which requires ultra-high purity silver, is expanding by 7 to 10% annually. Defense systems rely on silver for its unmatched electrical conductivity. And unlike copper, aluminum, or nickel, silver cannot be synthetically replaced in most of these applications. No metal on Earth conducts electricity better. None. That means as renewable energy scales, silver demand scales in a straight line. Not exponentially, not cyclically, but structurally. And here's the problem. 70% of the world's silver supply is a byproduct of mining other metals like zinc, lead, and copper. This means even if silver prices double, triple, or quadruple, miners cannot simply increase silver production. They only produce more silver if the demand for those other metals increases first. You can't just open new silver mines either. Geological availability is declining, ore grades are falling, and environmental restrictions make new mining operations extremely difficult and time-intensive. That's why global silver mining output has barely moved in a decade. Meanwhile, above-ground inventories, especially at the institutional and wholesale level, are collapsing. COMEX silver inventories have dropped by over 60% in just 4 years. The London Bullion Market Association's known supplies are shrinking. Industrial users are quietly shifting to long-term contracts because they know market liquidity is drying up. Manufacturers in solar and electronics do not care about silver's spot price. They only care about guaranteed supply. And when physical supply cannot be guaranteed, the price mechanism breaks. This is where silver's paper market becomes a huge problem. For decades, silver has been traded heavily through futures contracts, ETFs, and unallocated accounts. These are essentially IOUs for metal that may not physically exist in sufficient quantities. As long as confidence remained high, this system functioned. But when physical demand rises sharply and inventories fall, the leverage in the paper market becomes a liability. There are far more paper claims on silver than there is actual silver available for delivery. That's why we're seeing delivery delays, increasing premiums, and wholesalers reporting difficulty sourcing large quantities. The moment the market recognizes that paper silver can't meet physical demand, the system is forced into repricing. And repricing is never smooth. It's violent. When physical commodities hit structural deficits, prices do not rise slowly or rationally. They explode. We saw this with palladium between 2000 and 2020. We saw it with rhodium, which surged over 3,000%. We saw it with wheat during famine periods. We saw it with oil during the 1970s, geopolitical shocks when supply could not keep up with demand. The common denominator? When a commodity is essential and cannot be substituted and physical supply cannot expand, price becomes the only valve left to balance the system. Silver fits this pattern perfectly. Industrial demand is sticky, solar demand is inflexible. Medical and military demand cannot be reduced. EV and 5G demand is compounding. Meanwhile, global inventories are falling at an accelerating rate. Recycling cannot fill the gap. The majority of silver used in electronics, solar panels, and medical devices is economically unrecoverable, and even if recycling capacity expanded, it would take years to offset the current deficits. History shows what comes next. Once Stage 3 is recognized and the public realizes that the supply deficit is structural, not temporary, the shift to Stage 4 happens quickly. Panic buying, inventory hoarding, market dislocations, supply chain fractures, and price gaps emerge. Industrial buyers move first, locking in long-term contracts. Retail investors move next. Institutional money follows last. And at that point, price becomes purely a function of scarcity. Every major commodity crisis has played out this way. We are not there yet, but we are close. Silver is the most undervalued major asset relative to its structural demand and geological scarcity. It is priced like a cheap industrial metal, but it is functioning like a critical energy transition metal. It is treated like an abundant commodity, but it behaves like a constrained one. And it is valued like a side note in the financial system, while playing a central role in the technological and energy infrastructure of the 21st century. If you understand this pattern, you understand why silver's current price does not reflect its real-world importance, and why the repricing ahead may be extreme. Stay with me, because in the next section, I break down exactly how Stage 4 unfolds, how the market loses control, and what history tells us about the magnitude of the moves that follow. Have you ever wondered what happens when a critical commodity, one the entire world depends on, starts to run out? We're not talking about a temporary shortage. We're talking about a permanent structural deficit. To understand why a major revaluation in silver is not just possible, but inevitable, you need to grasp how commodity markets break. Every major commodity crisis, whether it's in food, energy, or metals, follows a predictable pattern. It transitions from a simple supply-demand imbalance into outright chaos when three powerful forces collide. First, real physical scarcity. Second, a surge in institutional buying. And third, a total breakdown in how the price is discovered. Right now, silver is standing at the epicenter of all three. Let's start with physical scarcity. This is no longer a what-if scenario. It's happening right now. We're seeing inventories at major warehouses like COMEX and the LBMA drop at an alarming rate. The vast majority of easily accessible above-ground silver has already been consumed by industry. This is a crucial point that separates silver from gold. Most of the gold ever mined still exists in a vault or as jewelry, but silver, it's been used up, permanently destroyed in electronics, solar panels, and chemical processes. Think about that. It means once the inventory drain really accelerates, there's no emergency stash, no giant reservoir we can tap into to quickly refill the supply lines. The well is running dry. Now, let's talk about the second force, institutional demand. This is where human psychology kicks in. When giant corporations, governments, and industrial buyers, the big players, realize that a steady supply of silver is no longer guaranteed, they do something very logical. They start buying up everything they can, as fast as they can. They front-load their purchases. We saw this exact behavior with palladium when car makers panicked about catalytic converter shortages. We saw it with rare earth metals when geopolitical tensions flared up. We've even seen it with food commodities during major droughts. Institutions aren't buying because they think the price will go up. They're buying because they are terrified of not being able to get the material at any price. For them, it's not about cost anymore. It's about survival. Imagine solar panel manufacturers, EV makers, medical device companies, and even defense contractors all quietly starting to build their own strategic stockpiles at the same time. The market flips from being merely tight to strained. And as anyone who has ever stretched a rubber band knows, strain always comes right before the snap. This brings us to the third and perhaps most critical force, the breakdown of price discovery. You see, the silver price you see on your screen every day, the spot price, isn't really determined by people buying and selling actual physical bars and coins. It's largely set by the futures market, by paper contracts that represent silver. The system works fine as long as everyone believes there's plenty of physical metal to back up those contracts. But what happens when that belief shatters? During a structural deficit, the futures market becomes increasingly irrelevant because its core promise, that the metal can be delivered if demanded, starts to break down. This is when you see premiums appear. Premiums are the first major red flag that the paper price no longer reflects physical reality. When you have to pay 20, 30, or even 40% over the spot price to get your hands on a real silver coin, when refineries are struggling to find raw material, when industrial buyers are reporting long delivery delays, that's the market screaming that the futures price is a lie. It becomes a lagging indicator, not a pricing tool. This is the setup for what I call Stage 4. In this stage, the market stops moving gradually and starts moving violently. Why? Because the system is forced to reprice based on actual brutal scarcity, not financial speculation. The price doesn't just climb, it gaps up, seemingly overnight. We witnessed this with palladium. Years of quiet deficits suddenly culminated in a price explosion that caught even the largest, most sophisticated institutions completely off guard. We saw a similar dynamic in rhodium's historic price spike. Silver has the exact same mathematical setup, but with a terrifying twist. Our global dependence on it is far, far greater, especially because of the green energy transition. Think about the demand drivers. Solar panel production isn't slowing down. It's accelerating at an incredible pace. Electric vehicle manufacturing isn't leveling off. It's scaling up globally. The rollout of 5G infrastructure isn't finished. It's still expanding. And now we have the explosion of AI with massive data centers that require enormous and complex electrical systems, driving even more demand for high conductivity metals. In all of these critical applications, silver is essentially irreplaceable. Copper can't match its unique properties. Aluminum is not a viable substitute, and large-scale synthetic alternatives simply do not exist. When you have a critical ingredient with no replacement, scarcity becomes catastrophic for price stability. So, what about just mining more? This is where the problem becomes truly irreversible. Here's a fact that most people don't know. About 70% of all silver is mined as a byproduct of other metals like zinc, lead, and copper. This means that even if the price of silver skyrockets, it doesn't automatically lead to a massive surge in production. The world doesn't necessarily need more zinc and lead just because we need more silver. And while copper demand might rise, bringing a new major copper mine online takes, on average, 7 to 10 years. Pure primary silver mines are incredibly rare, expensive to build, and often located in politically unstable parts of the world. The bottom line is this: silver supply is extremely inelastic. It does not respond quickly or even slowly to higher prices. This is the textbook definition of a structural crisis. When supply cannot respond and demand is non-negotiable, the only way the market can function is to ration the available silver through one mechanism: price. And that rationing process will be violent. Okay, but what about recycling? Can't we just get the silver back from old electronics and solar panels? Not easily. Most of the silver in these products is dispersed in microscopic amounts. Recovering it is technically possible, but it's incredibly difficult and, for the most part, not economically viable. Building the kind of massive global recycling infrastructure needed would take at least a decade. And even then, the amount recovered would be a drop in the ocean compared to the demand. Substitution is even more of a fantasy. For years, the best engineers in the world have been trying to reduce or eliminate silver in solar cells, and they've made very little progress. The laws of physics just don't allow other materials to match silver's performance. The green energy transition is chained to silver, whether our leaders and policymakers want to admit it or not. This all leads to the final phase, the psychological break. This is the moment when investors, corporations, and eventually governments finally recognize that the silver market is structurally broken and incapable of meeting demand. The story of scarcity hits the mainstream news. That's when the real panic begins. Manufacturers start hoarding whatever they can get their hands on. Investors reallocate their portfolios. Sovereign nations may even begin to quietly accumulate physical metal as a strategic reserve. This is the moment when the price behavior transforms from steady and predictable to chaotic and explosive. The so-called experts will call it irrational. Mainstream commentators will call it a bubble, but it won't be a bubble. It will be a repricing event, a violent correction caused by decades of profound undervaluation. For half a century, silver has been fundamentally mispriced. Its role as money collapsed right at the same time its industrial role exploded into something essential for modern life. We priced it like it was as common as copper, but we consumed it like it was as precious as gold. We treated it like an abundant metal while we were depleting its finite stockpiles at a record pace. And we allowed paper markets to suppress its price while the physical inventories quietly vanished. Now, the simple, undeniable math is finally catching up. What happens next is exactly what has happened in every major commodity crisis throughout history. The moment the public realizes the shortage is structural and permanent, not just a temporary hiccup, the market undergoes a violent revaluation. This is why silver may be the single most undervalued asset in human history. Not just because its price is low today, but because its importance to our civilization is unmatched relative to its available supply. Silver is the foundation of solar power, electrification, medical imaging, communications, and defense technology. It is the invisible backbone of our entire modern world. And yet, its price still behaves as if we're living in the 1980s. That disconnect cannot and will not last. Whether it happens in a few months or a few years, the repricing is inevitable because the physical reality of scarcity demands it. If you can see this pattern, you can understand both the immense opportunity and the stark warning. Silver's coming rise isn't about speculation. It's about structural scarcity colliding head-on with unstoppable global dependence. And whenever those two forces meet, history always ends the same way, with shortages, hoarding, panic, a massive revaluation, and a historic transfer of wealth. That is where we are heading. And that is why the world and you must prepare now. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights.